Hello, my name is Brian Lucas, and I'm a Senior Software Architect at Computer Aid Incorporated. For today's webinar, because of the nature of the material being presented, I would ask that you hold your questions until the end of the presentation. Afterwards, I will take any questions concerning the subject matter covered in the webinar first, followed by any other questions that the audience may have. If you have a lot of questions or somebody want to really explore some material that's not being covered in this webinar, such as, how do you persist the encapsulation of user stories down through code and object-oriented implementations, I'm very happy to stray outside the subject of the webinar, and in fact, we can do email streams or blogs or things like that afterwards. So, today we're going to answer the question, should you be adopting Agile over traditional methodologies? This seminar really targets people who are still not sure about Agile and those that need more information to convince their management of Agile's efficacy. It's also for people who are just interested in learning about how Agile evolved. So, are you ready to evolve and ensure your success? The objectives of this webinar are, first, we want to show how the underlying concepts of Agile drive the methodologies approach and the process-oriented thinking to people-centric rationale. We also want to show how Agile methods are really a logical progression based upon evolutionary drives. We will demonstrate the powerful return on investment and many benefits embracing Agile, from a 10-to-1 ROI to an 8-to-1 reduction in the risk of scope creep. We'll see that not only do these principles apply successfully to software development, but they also translate into organizational structure, business processes, and operations as well. And we'll show that Scrum is the #1 Agile methodology in the world, according to a recently published Forrester report called Ensure Success for Agile Using 4 Simple Steps. Finally, you'll be able to answer the question for yourself, should you be adopting an Agile method? Let's take a look at a little bit of history first. Agile methods grew out of software methodologies that were really formulated in the 1960s. These, in turn, were based on project management practices. Project management, in fact, has been practiced since early civilization. The building of the Great Pyramids, the Great Wall of China, Hadrian's Wall in Great Britain, all of these required successful application of project management. Until the 1900s, civil engineering projects were generally managed by creative architects and engineers. It was in the 1950s that the organization started to systematically apply project management tools and techniques to complex engineering projects. Software methodology really has finally matured. It began in the 1960s in an effort to organize and conduct software development in a more efficient and cost-effective manner. As project efforts became larger and more complex, the demands of communication and coordination evolved into a constant struggle for success against bureaucracy, coordination, and chaos. Process was the focus of all standards and guide efforts. The CPM method is a project modeling technique that developed in the 1950s by Morgan Walker of DuPont. The precursors of this method were very significant in contributing to the success of the Manhattan Project. In addition, probably the most well-known treatment of project management success is included in the Project Management Institute's Project Management Body of Knowledge book. This is a great book. Any of you who haven't read it, you really do need to read it. It's consistent with the standards of ISO 9000 and SEI CMMI. This book, by the way, does not specify a methodology. In fact, the term waterfall isn't even mentioned in this book. Agile is, and you need to know that Agile is completely compatible with the Project Management Book of Knowledge. Now, one thing the Project Management Book of Knowledge doesn't cover is upstream of software development, really. And that's a very, very important part of influencing the success of your entire project. So, one of the recent concepts that just come into light is the Total Cost Management Framework by the American Association of Cost Engineers. And this book handles everything that's upstream, and it does include the downstream information as well. This is a great book to start applying Agile principles early on in your organization. But again, these are all good ideas, but they really describe processes alone. They ignore the most important element in the effort, which is people. So, why is the ROI of business process management-based thinking so low? Well, despite the fact that there's been a lot of effort in here, the fact is that this is all based entirely on manufacturing principles and physical product production. In physical production, the consistent production of the same targeted level of quality is in every product is the key to manufacturing success. This is not the case in software development. So let's take a look at what BPM and process management and manufacturing principles led into this. The first was, excuse me, Frederick Wilson Taylor. He's an American mechanical engineer, and he was known as really the father of the scientific method. Taylor was one of the intellectual leaders of the efficiency movement, and his ideas were highly influential in the progressive area. Taylor was the first man in recorded history who deemed work that was deserving of systematic observation and study. Henry Gantt was an American mechanical engineer and management consultant. He developed the Gantt chart, and I'm sure everybody is familiar with the Gantt chart. Again, we're looking at a year of 1910 for this. Henry Fayol was a French mining engineer and a director of mines who developed a general theory of business administration independently of scientific management by Taylor. He proposed that there were 6 primary functions in management: forecasting, planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and monitoring. You're all familiar with those things. Again, that was in a time frame of 1916. Walter Short was an American physicist, engineer, and statistician. He's known as the father of statistical quality control. He created the basis for the control chart and the concept of state of statistical control by carefully designed experiments. This happened in around 1930. Morgan Walter, who we just mentioned, a little while ago, he's the creator of the critical path method, and that was used during the Manhattan Project. Ishikawa really was the father of total quality management, and he based his work on the early work of Edward Deming, and this became the basis of a lot of the modern manufacturing processes. Software development really evolved as a seat-of-the-pants effort early on in the days of computing when accounting departments owned information systems. Standards revolved at that time around maintaining or maximizing the efficiency of highly limited machine computing power. Finally, Winston Royce, who's an American computer scientist and director at Lockheed, emerged as one of the leaders in software development in the second half of the 20th century. He was the first person to describe a model for software development in 1970. This was the waterfall model, although Royce did not use the term waterfall in the article, nor did he advocate the waterfall model as a working methodology. But the industry was starved for direction. Unfortunately, business process management generally fails when applied to software because, as you can see, it is driven by concepts that are older than computer technology. Remember that computer technology only really started to develop consumer-directed applications in the 1980s. In software products, there's no real continuous production or replication as there is in manufacturing. Once created, the product is complete except for maintenance and any desired improvement. Therefore, the emphasis on software has to shift from replicating a product over and over again with the same quality to designing a better product. In the 1970s and the 1980s, the demand for standards and better ways of developing software was very, very high. This demand led for standards and processes and an outgrowth of worldwide organization. The capability maturity model was developed by Carnegie Mellon University and based upon the